Hey everybody, this is Cliff from SpeedCurve, and I'm here to give you an update on Lighthouse version 6 and support that we've recently introduced as we've rolled out new test agents at SpeedCurve. Really quickly, just as a reminder, your Lighthouse settings, the way that the Lighthouse works is we essentially just run an additional test on top of the test that you've already run with web page test. These are very separate, so a lot of times you'll see different results potentially in your Lighthouse run versus what you ran within your web page tests or web page test scripted settings. The reason it is that we actually have fixed settings for Lighthouse. We now support the official mobile and desktop settings for Lighthouse, and your test results that you're recording and testing otherwise might have a different configuration. Might use a different test agent, might use different test settings, a lot of different things that can throw that off there, as well as the fact that we do not support scripting for within Lighthouse. We do not have support for scripted web page test runs within Lighthouse. So a lot of times we get questions about that as well, about why the test that's being recorded and the results that are being reported within Lighthouse are very much far off from what was actually done in a scripted web page test. So what was changed? We heard about this a while back. This was the previous Lighthouse metrics for version 5.6. That were being used to factor in your performance score, first contentful paint, speed index, first meaningful paint, timed interactive, and first CPU idle. The biggest change that we saw is that first meaningful paint and first CPU idle were dropped from Lighthouse. So those are no longer being captured, and they've been replaced with what's known as these new core web vitals. And if you haven't heard about core web vitals by now, check out one of our videos that actually talks more specifically about that, or go to web dev on Google to be able to kind of look and see what core web vitals are and why you should care. Largest contentful paint, total blocking time, and cumulative layout shift, or CLS, have been introduced in replacement of those metrics in V6. And here's the new associated weighting. We can see that first contentful paint and speed index both are weighted lower than they previously were because of the introduction of these new metrics. And you've got a strong preference towards LCP and total blocking time, as you can see weighted there at 25%. CLS is weighted at just 5%. This is a new metric, and one that we're starting to collect and understand more. Great to see it included in the weighting. However, you can see it doesn't carry quite as much weight as some of the other metrics that we've known and been watching for quite a bit of time overall. So those are the changes. That's what's been introduced. Some of our quick observations that we're seeing, and some things that you may expect as you start to look at your own Lighthouse scores within SpeedCurve, is that mobile scores stayed roughly about the same. The difference what we're seeing is higher scores for desktop, and a lot of this due to those throttling settings that were changed and introduced now, as we mentioned previously, where we've got the fixed support for those different Lighthouse test agents. So anyway, hope this is helpful. I'm going to take you through really quickly a quick setup of a test dashboard that walks you through performance scoring for Lighthouse and how you might want to think about that as you're tracking and trending these over time. Okay, we're back to walk through a quick dashboard that I set up. The focus of this dashboard would really be for someone who is really uber focused on Lighthouse scores specifically, but maybe they don't have as much focus on other things that you can track and monitor in SpeedCurve. Perfect thing to set up a favorites dashboard for those groups of users, as well as give them some reporting capability on Lighthouse. So I'm not going to walk through the dashboard creation process. We've got a lot of other great videos that you can go to see how we set some of these dashboards up. But at a high level, what I did is I took two charts. The first chart was just a breakdown of Lighthouse performance scores over time. So there are multiple scores within Lighthouse, including performance, PWA, accessibility, best practices, and SEO. So someone who cares about Lighthouse probably wants to see these things trended over time. And you can kind of see how performance, because these are metrics and time-based metrics that will vary, has a little bit more variability than you'll see with some of the other scores. And then I created a chart that was focused on those metrics that we already talked about and mentioned that are going to be more specific to Lighthouse scoring and weighted accordingly. So the nice thing here is you can start to see when these metrics change, how they actually impact your score. So just to simplify this, I can show you if I just unselect everything here, just to focus on the performance score. And I take something like JS total blocking time, which we know is going to have a pretty heavily weighted impact, or largest contentful paint, both at about 25%. Let's go ahead and just look at those two in isolation, and you can see the impact that they might have. You can see this big jump here with JS total blocking time that occurred, and then the associated drop that you see in the performance score up above. So this is kind of a nice way to sort of get some of those trends set and looked at over time. Really quickly, what I would recommend on this is setting a performance budget, taking a page out of Harry Roberts' book, a great performance consultant in the UK that had a suggestion at Performance Now a while back that you look at your last 2 weeks of metrics when you're setting a performance budget and just kind of start there at that low or high point. So if I look at the options here within this chart, if I want to set up a budget, I could go ahead and say Lighthouse performance score, absolute threshold. I want to set this at the point in time at which the score was the lowest, which I think that was at about 36 or 38. We'll go ahead and just say 36 was the lowest score that we saw there. And I'm not going to set a rate of change. I'm not going to send alerts on this. This is just to kind of hold the line on the budget so we know that we can always, continue to improve on that. And I'm going to say save. Now what we'll be able to see is that budget being applied and set on that chart and looked at over the last 2 weeks to say, okay, where were we at? Let's not drop below here. At that point where we did see that drop in the score, it was at 38. We came right up to that line. We're going to give ourselves that much leeway and allow us to go ahead and look at that over time. But if that budget does get crossed or this performance score drops below a 38, we're going to basically flag that as a performance budget violation. So that's the first thing I want to show. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is, remember, with these favorites dashboards and charts, they can be sent as a weekly email report. Again, great if somebody's not in the product all the time but needs to stay apprised of what's going on with Lighthouse. Here's an example of what that'll look like every week in their mailbox. They'll see which metrics in that dashboard changed the most and kind of bubble those up there at the top. And then we'll see kind of a breakdown of the change over the last week over week to report on that and look at that over time. So a great summary of what's going on with this dashboard. Hopefully that's helpful. I would suggest go ahead and start tracking and trending this now. Be aware of some of those changes that we talked about with Lighthouse. A great kind of benchmark for us to use to look at improving performance over time, but being aware of some of the caveats and things that have changed. If you've been focused on the 5.6 scoring, this is now what you can expect. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.